Hello everyone and welcome if you stumbled by. So I love Bloodborne. I think Bloodborne is one of the best games that has come out over the past couple years and it still holds up pretty well. So in honor of Elden Ring, I wanted to make a video about one of my favorite bosses of all time and arguably very underrated in my opinion. And that's Laurence, the first Vicar. And I know what everybody's thinking, Laurence, why Laurence? There's so many great bosses in Bloodborne, why is Laurence underrated? And you're absolutely right. Every single boss in Bloodborne is amazing, but I do think that Laurence is such an underrated boss in Bloodborne, and I will explain why. So Laurence, the king. This idea actually came from listening to his soundtrack, and I noticed how well his soundtrack actually fit with his theme, and I think that's what I mostly want to look at, his theme. So I don't want to go too much detail into Lawrence's lore. I think everyone should check him out themselves. It's amazing, it's great. But I did want to compare him a little bit to Ludwig. Now Ludwig is in the same DLC, and I also think Ludwig is underrated in the entire Bloodborne universe. But Ludwig and Laurence represent two different themes in the Bloodborne universe, and what I love about Laurence is that he is a man who fell from grace. Here's the man responsible for basically everything in the Bloodborne world. Ludwig represents a man who turned to a beast who, through sheer willpower, was able to overcome this beast and reclaim his humanity. However, Ludwig, on the other hand, is completely different. Laurence can best be described as the best of humanity who fell from grace, and I think his theme represents this very nicely. I mean, look at his soundtrack. It starts off as something extremely familiar, the cleric beast, something that you fought before, and you remember it being very wild and feral. But what I absolutely love about his soundtrack is that, yes, it starts off familiar, starts off as a cleric beast theme in a way. It starts to become something grander, like with the whole orchestra. It's almost as if with the soundtrack alone we can follow Lawrence's footsteps and we can see how he fell from grace, how he decided to not listen to people and he just fell. He turned into a beast. And I think that's why the cleric beast theme was implemented at first. I think one of the biggest differences between Laurence and Ludwig was that Ludwig was able to overcome the beastness, but Laurence, on the other hand, was so blinded at first that he just pursued the blood even if he had multiple warnings. Laurence, in his blindness, became a beast, and I think that's why his boss fight is so wild, and because he's still blinded by that. Although this boss is optional, I think the entire game leads up to this moment where you fight Laurence. And I think that his soundtrack actually reflects this because in the middle of the soundtrack it actually changes from being this chaotic cleric beast like soundtrack to what feels like a man who has peaked the heavens and the cosmos and just has blinded himself in that sort of way, where you finally come across the man who is responsible for this scourge and who has basically succumbed to this madness. It's pretty tragic, honestly. And I think that's what Laurence, his whole entire theme is all about, is tragedy. He started something out of trying to be good and it ended up just not. Now, do I think that Laurence is the best boss in the game in general? No, I don't think so. But I think he's truly underrated and not to be overlooked, especially because he is optional. Alright, and thank you to anybody who's watching this. I'm really bad at this, and it was really awkward for me to do this, but I have a lot of ideas, and I really want to try to be more creative on YouTube. So, thank you very much, and please subscribe.